Hey everybody, this is Stuart with Wine on the Dime, and today I'm at Adega Vinho. I'm here with Michael Bilger, and we are going to be looking at some of your wines that you have. And before we get into the wine, I guess go ahead and let everybody who's watching this video kind of learn a little bit more about you and how you got into wine.
How you doing? I'm Michael, and my brother and I, my father and his wife, we own Adega Vinho, which is originally started out as Bilger Family Vineyards, and then we wanted to start producing our own wine and not just grow it. And from there, we have a lot of collaborative ideas from the family that came together, and the end result was a label named Adega Vinho, which is Portuguese for wine cellar. The way we got that name is we have 12 acres of vines planted on our 37-acre estate, and out of that 12 acres, 9 of the varieties are historically Portuguese varietals, and those are Touriga Nacional, Tinta Cal, Sisal, Arento, and Alvarinho, and then also we also have Mourvedre and Tempranillo growing on the property. Excuse me, 9 of the 12. So that's 7 out of the 9 are originally Portuguese varietals, and we just wanted to have a name a little different than just our last name or something regional or colloquial. So anyway, spent a few years working under Todd at Ron Yates, 2 harvests, vintage 17 and 18, and in the past I worked for Bella Vista Ranch and have a degree in viticulture from the Texas Tech system, and we really just love wine. We've been around here since 2016 running around, but ideas and learning how to grow grapes has gone back for the last 10 years. And so we're really happy to have opened up in the beginning of 2020, and despite some of the shutdowns and whatnot, we're back open. We're serving food now, and we're serving our wines.
You are focusing on Portuguese varieties.
Mm-hmm.
Why specifically Portuguese varietals?
Well, so right now we're focusing on Portuguese varietals. Now, most of our wine is would be considered French Rhone, either single varietals, blends, or Spanish Tempranillo. But like I said, of the varieties that we have planted here, the majority of them are warm weather, warm climate grapes, and we really enjoy Touriga Nacional as a single varietal, but also a red wine in the blending of Tempranillo or Mourvedre. So you just have a little bit there to work with, a little bit more to work with, I should say, rather than just buying grapes from your neighbor or the Texas High Plains and changing every year.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the infancy of this Portuguese-esque wine program, but we're going to be building our program to also include Texas ports that will be estate ports, but that will happen as we build relationships with people who can distill our wine, and that'll happen here in the next few years. And so we're just slowly, incrementally getting into more Portuguese production. I would like to try to buy more Tinta Cal, more Touriga from other hill country and high plains growers, but right now, basically what we can get our hands on is what we'll be producing. When it comes to Portuguese varietals, I think that Touriga Nacional grows real well here in the hill country, and it also grows real well in the high plains. Like I said, it's a warm climate grape. To me, hill country Touriga that I've tasted, the small lots that I've tasted from some of our neighboring wineries, have really reminded me of Cab and Cabernet Sauvignon. And you can take Touriga that route. You can also use it for beautiful rosés, and you can also use it as a blender to bring out tannin or bring out your floral aspect, and it just has a lot of nice usages. And here at the vineyard, or here at the estate, we have a little bit under 3 acres planted, and the first half acre has done just a beautiful job after the last 4 vintages. We harvested 2019 and this 2020, and we've been able to make a few barrels of wine out of that Touriga, and the vines grow well. They do well in this climate. They're a little bit more vigorous, and it's just all about approach and how you manage your vines, and we think we do a good job at it. And if I could go back and pull some vines out and replant again, I'd probably plant more Touriga. But that doesn't mean we're just locked in on that. We also love Vino Verdes, and that's the reason that we planted Alvarengo.
So are you going to be making any Vino Verde?
Yes, we will.
Yes! So I've been asking for somebody in Texas to be making one. It's one of my favorite wines to drink during the summer.
So it's hot. I mean, it's hot right now, and it's the first week of October. It's a very approachable wine. It fits in with our climate, fits in with our geography very well, and we grow 2 acres of Alvarengo, which is the main variety of Vino Verde is Alvarengo. And so on good years we'll have just a single varietal Alvarengo. On other years we're going to have a blend to have a slightly effervescent Vino Verde.
That's such great news.
And we want to try to keep the price point low so it's approachable, and
I'm very happy about that. I really am.
Yeah, well, thank you. And we'll play around with barrel fermentations in that, and we'll find out what suits our terroir and our growing area the best.
And so, speaking of kind of the growing area, especially on the estate, you have kind of an interesting blend of soil types. And as we were going through, you're showing that you have some areas that are just very sandy, like very fine grained sand.
Yep.
And then you have some other spots that are basically more of like a clay bed.
Yes.
So whenever you're actually looking at kind of planning out your vineyard and you're actually performing maintenance on it, how are you taking those into account as you're working through those rows?
So the management of the vines, for the most part, about 80% of the vineyard, how it deals with soil is about the same. The other, I would say 20-25% of the soils on this property are very fine grained, sandy limestone. So it's very almost like talcum powder in some instances, or very fine beach sand. Then the majority of the vineyard is planted on medium to heavy clay sandy loam. It's very red clay, lots of oxidized irons in there, which is great because it's still a limestone base. And so some of the world's famous wine regions are planted in clay, sandy loam, very oxidized red dirt. So we're very lucky to have that. So we have to water more in those sandy areas, in those areas that are lacking clay, and we probably have to water about double during the growing season than we have to water with the clay. But the plants, with all that water, you have to regulate vigor a little bit too. So there's a fine line of overwatering with those plants. The vines that we have in the clay sandy loam up top, which we planted in 2017, that's about 1.5 acres of Mourvedre. We planted another 1.5 acres in the clay sandy, or the limestone sand. So it'll be nice to be able to harvest both, keep them separate, and then do comparative tastings side by side with a different terroir from the same exact estate vintage. I think I say different terroir, different soil structure will give you a different aromatic, hopefully, and hopefully a different mouthfeel. We get a lot of chalky minerality finishes from the wine here, a little bit of smokiness in our reds that I attribute to the soil structure here. So hopefully that'll continue to progress as these vines age, and we can focus our wine program at our estate more than just buying grapes. So right now, this year, 75% of our vintage is Texas Hillcountry. So that would be our estate grown 4 acres of Tempranillo, Touriga Nacional, Mourvedre, and Sangiovese. And then we also bought Tempranillo and Touriga Nacional from Rob Parr this year, and Syrah, Merlot, and Chardonnay from Texas Hills, and a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon from Johnson City. And then we also bought from one grower in the High Plains this year, 10 tons. We received some Tannat, Grenache, and a little bit of Merlot from the High Plains. And we also got a few tons of Tempranillo from Rusty Dutton outside of La Mesa. The goal is to be almost 100% Texas Hillcountry and 50% estate. So we'll see if that we can progress it
It just takes
in
time.
the upcoming years.
The vines
Yeah.
are young, so
There's no
yeah.
push. There's no push, but this is a long-term goal. It's not a 5-year plan. It's a 20-year plan.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to focus on those Portuguese varietals when they come into play. Right now, they're still growing. We're still establishing roots and trunks on a lot of that vineyard, or a lot of parts of that vineyard, and so here in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be harvesting. We'll have a full harvest year, so we should be bringing between 30 and 40 tons of grapes off this 12 acres.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the wine.
Yeah.
So you have a Viognier here.
Yeah, so this is our Viognier. This is our 2018 Viognier. This is all Texas High Plains from 2 different growers in the Texas High Plains. So we got 2 tons of this Viognier. We picked it at pretty high bricks. We're about 24.5, 25 bricks. So it gives us a good alcohol of about 14%. This Viognier was 2/3 tank fermented in a stainless steel tank, and 1/3 fermented in a new American oak and a second fill French oak.
Oh, okay.
So it's 1/3 barrel fermented. And so after we go through the fermentation in barrel, we also inoculate ML in barrel, do a lot of lees stirring, and then blend this 2 barrels with the other 4, the equivalent of 4 barrels of tank fermented Viognier, and that gives us 150 cases. So this is a 150 case lot, that'd be 6 barrels, and blend it, and a couple weeks later we bottle it.
It smells great.
Thank you, yeah. Has some beautiful aromatics of peach and nectarine and honeysuckle. So you hit a lot of those aromatics that Viognier should hit on the palate. The lemongrass and the citrus really shine on the palate, but you can really see how the lees stirring and the ML has contributed to this Viognier.
It's very full. Like, it's not like your typical kind of what a lot of people are doing with Viognier, which is kind of keeping it very tropical around here, and pushing it from that angle. This is definitely something that it's kind of more. It's gonna sound cliche. It's more well-rounded on the palate. Like it really does have a good like.
It has a lot of weight in the mid palate. Has different layers, but the layers aren't, you're not getting hit with punchy notes and fruit notes. It's very balanced. We like to take all of our whites through ML. And our rosés also all go through ML.
It's very soft.
And that's thank you. And that's
it's a very soft wine.
That's out of necessity, and out of the winemaking, and it's also a protective thing. But it's also how our taste is. I do enjoy more punchy, more acid-driven Viogniers and more acid-driven whites, but this is sort of our style. So
well, I mean,
we're sticking to.
They both have their places, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like you have, whenever especially around here with it being hot, whenever you're thinking about like porch sippers, stuff like that, having something that's kind of really cold, really punchy, it's not a bad thing. But like the way I see it is there's also this category of like, I want to have maybe a potential for that, but I also want to enjoy this bit more with food and not have like all that acidity and all that other kind of just ultra fruit concentration like smack my food. I want to be able to taste them both, right? And this is where these types of wines really fit in.
Well, so this Viognier here, I say it a lot, roasted chicken and anything roasted in the poultry area.
I was thinking turkey. Turkey would be really good with this. This is like almost like a Thanksgiving wine.
This is Thanksgiving wine. We drank a lot of this last Thanksgiving. Probably too much last Thanksgiving. But,
that's okay. As long as you're not driving anywhere, just sleep on the couch.
Yeah.
No, this is fun.
We really like this Viognier. And what's nice about this Viognier is it's a starting point. So this is our very first Viognier. And then next year, when we release our 2019 Viognier, we stepped it up a little bit with our barrel program. So instead of it being 1/3 barrel fermented, it's almost it's almost half barrel fermented. It's, if you wanted to say the percentage, it's probably 45% barrel fermented. It's just 175 cases, so a little bit more wine. That'll be interesting. We bottled it a few months ago, but we've already tapped into it, and it's along the same structure and balance, but just a little bit more oak, and it's fun. It's fun wine. So,
if y'all have not had a barrel fermented Viognier, especially one that also goes through MLF, like I said, a lot of Texas wineries, they don't tend to do that, and so make sure you stop by and try this one, because it's very unique compared to some of the other Viogniers that you're going to find that are made around here. A lot of them are pretty much like tank and go, and this has sort of that like it just brings it to from a different angle. It's like whereas I would say a lot of the kind of the stainless steel and bottle preparations, they're almost like an angular wine in a way, kind of the, like, approach from one side, like I'm super tropical or I'm super acidic. This really does kind of give you a more well-rounded approach to what the varietal actually can do.
And that doesn't say that in the future we won't make a very punchy, citrus-driven Viognier. We're open to that, but right now barrel fermentation is kind of our thing for our whites.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with the punchy wine. Like I said, everything has its place, but this is, I'm glad you brought this out, because this is a really interesting one.
Well, thank you.
It compares with some of the other Viogniers.
It's a great starting point to go into our barrel fermented estate rosé that also went through MLF. So it's sort of a segue to the next wine also.
Awesome.
So let me go grab that real quick.
Cool. So you have the rosé out.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about this rosé here.
So this is our very first estate grown Mourvedre rosé. So it's 100% Mourvedre. The vines are planted in front of our White House, which are more of a higher density planting. They're 5-foot plant spacing and 6-foot row spacing. And we did that just to see how Mourvedre will grow in a high density planting. And they seem to be doing well. This year we used those grapes for red wine. Last year we used them for just this lot of rosé. And I think moving forward I'm going to use that as just a purely rosé lot. So that's we're a little bit under an acre. So the third year growth yielded us about 1.2 tons on that. So we were able to make about 50 cases of this. So we pick the grapes at the right phenolics and bricks, and we bring them into the winery here, and we do a direct press. After the direct press will settle and go directly into our barrels where we start fermentation. From there we'll also go through MLF in the barrel. Lots of stirring and lots of love with the wine. We try to, on our rosés, do minimal movement. We try to, if we don't do gravity and we use a pump, we try to run the pump slow, and we just try to minimalize the movement of our wines as much as possible with our whites and rosés.
Awesome.
And so nothing really super special about this fermentation other than right after primary, like I said, we'll inoculate ML and we'll just do a lot of stirring, and that's when I say a lot of love when that comes in. So this is a little bit higher alcohol rosé. It's 14.5% ABV, but the reason we did that is so we could get all of the nice tannins and nice fruit structure in a third year vine and a third year harvest. So when I smell this, I think originally Bandol or Provence,
it has a southern French spin on it. Yeah, it definitely does.
And the color is in the light salmon to gold, which is just a very beautiful, beautiful color.
It matches the color of my hand. So yeah, it's kind of going a little salmon today there.
I know people don't like to talk about legs much, but it has beautiful legs and just has a nice distinction between the alcohol and the fruit.
It has this really good, I'm trying to figure out what it is that's hanging on in the finish. It's almost like a sour raspberry. but it like clings like if I had to visualize this, if I could animate this on my channel, but I'm not that talented.
Please, you're
and
making my day.
I do not have enough money to do that. It's almost like as you're swallowing it, like some of the other flavors tend to pull off, but then like that sour raspberry I was talking about is just kind of like holding on to the back of your tongue, like no, I don't want to go. Yeah. Just like it just hangs on forever.
It's a good balance of citrus and berry is what I get from this. Some people say they pick peach up on it. I don't know.
I'm getting more of like a lemon note.
Yeah.
Like, and that's more on like the approach going into the mid palate. And then the berries, I feel like kind of pull more into like the mid palate going into the finish.
Mid to finish with the berries, yeah. We didn't know what we were getting into with this fruit because, like I said, it was the third leaf. So we harvested this late August. It was High Bricks Rosé, and we're really happy with it. It created something nice.
I mean, it really has a nice, and just like you said, everything goes through MLF, so it has that still kind of southern French kind of acid there, but it also has sort of that kind of same thing with the Viognier, that sort of whole mouthfeel, that round note that you get out of it.
And I like rosés with a heavy palate. That's just kind of our thing. So whether you get that heavy palate from the alcohol or from the lees stirring, it is what it is.
I mean, and it develops like differently too than the Viognier. The Viognier was very, like, kind of hits you all around at one time. And on this one, as I'm going through it, I kind of like the different zones of the tongue or what kind of picks stuff up. So I kind of goes through the middle and it works its way out to the side of your tongue. And that's when I'm like, especially when it gets to the side, is when I'm really picking up on sort of almost like a little bit of like a flintiness that's there.
Yeah, the finish has a little bit of flint. What do you want to call it? A mild smokiness, and I attribute that to the soils that it's growing in. The soil that this Mourvedre grows in is heavy clay, sandy loam, and so highly oxidized, very red soil with bits and pieces of limestone in that soil. And over the years, the Germans had pulled out all of the big rocks because in the past this has been, this property has been farmed for almost 200 years. So in the past, if you look at, across the street where they haven't farmed maybe ever, there are boulders and there are rocks here that are just natural, but you don't find that throughout the vineyards. Everything that's left is flint, pieces of limestone and porous limestone that, to me, it's just a beautiful soil to grow grapes in.
No, it really does show. I mean,
I can't wait for you to taste the red wine. that was the same, just 50 feet away from where these grapes are grown. It's almost a very similar finish, and so through these years we'll develop a true idea of what locations on the vineyard, reflect the wine in certain ways. But I think moving forward after this wine has developed into what it has been, we're going to go ahead and allocate that area for rosé only. So
nice.
Moving forward, we'll always hopefully pick that same lot.
It's not necessarily like having a house blend, but you'll kind of have like almost like designated sections.
Yes.
Like this is where our rosé is coming from. Like
I think
because
so.
Based off what we found within the quality.
So for the 2020 vintage, we made it into red wine, and that I needed more red wine so we can have a Syrah Mourvedre blends, have the estate Mourvedre blend, a single variety, hopefully, if it works out right. And we had already produced a lot of rosé early on in this vintage, so that's why we pulled back and said, okay, we have 300 cases of rosé from 4 different types of Tempranillo, Syrah, Merlot, and some Mourvedre as well. And so we're good with rosé this year. Next year we'll have a little bit better planning. Put the grapes on the rosé.
But it's like organize it a little bit better.
Very low fining, and when I say that, we use fermentation bentonite, and I'll be very open with the production of it. Very post primary, it went through MLF. There was a series of rackings to get the clarity that it has. And then we bottled in early January. And that wine's very straightforward, minimal SO2 usage, lots of lees stirring, minimal oxygen contact, so it was fermented in a very reductive manner in the barrels, so that it was a little stinky right after fermentation, but we knew that that was okay and just not freak out about it. And stir away that reductive quality, and a year later, that's what we get. So
nice, yeah. It was very tasty.
hopefully, we can continue to produce rosé on that level, because not to say that it's a superior rosé, but it really does truly reflect on the terroir here and what we're growing, with the minimal impact and the minimal movement of that wine, I should say. But let's get into a red wine.
All right.
If you want to.
Yeah, let's go for it. All right, so we moved on to red wine. So what have we got here?
So this is one of the lighter wines in our portfolio. This is our 2017, we call it Pinofleri. Pinofleri is an antiquated synonym of Mourvedre, Monastrell, Mataro. It's the same variety. It's just, if you go onto the Plant Foundation Services website, and you can see the whole lineage of all the different names, which are geographically specific. So Pinofleri is Latin for small flirt, and so a lot of people believe that it was just an old regional term for Mourvedre. And if I could find a psalm who could maybe be a little bit more geographic specific, we go with it, but other websites have listed as a synonym. And as we know, Mourvedre is often referred to as the Pinot of Texas. So we try to take our Mourvedre into to match up with that definition. And so this is a little bit lighter bodied red wine, a little bit lower alcohol, 11.5%. But the phenolics in 2017 were just amazing. That was a beautiful vintage. We picked these grapes from Buena Suerte Vineyards, which is, at the time, was managed by the Bingham families out of Meadow, Texas. She's got these into the winery.
It's got an intense nose.
Yeah, so it has an intense nose of cherry, a little bit of stewed tomato that's been developing over the last few years. Very simple fermentation protocol on this. We receive the grapes, crush them, go to bin fermentation, but we do a cooler temperature fermentation on this. The cellar was set at about 60 degrees with lots of punch downs in the first during primary fermentation, which will bring the temperature down as well. And so this was made in a very Pinot style. We did a lot of lees stirring, finished fermentation in barrel with ML in barrel, which gives you just this beautiful light Mourvedre. This is a wine that I would like to say is on the elegant side. It's smooth, balanced, and weighted where it needs to be, yet it's very food friendly, and the tannins don't punch you on the finish.
Man, this is really good. it has a really good, just like fruit note. But the thing I like about this one is that I can actually taste some of the barrel in there.
Yeah.
But it's all on par with everything else. So the fruit intensity, the barrel intensity, there's almost like this like slight cinnamon clove type thing coming out of it.
Yeah, there is a bit of a cinnamon on it, and that's always a difficult. It's difficult sometimes to tell someone that you have cinnamon on, because it's not a sweet cinnamon. It's just a very subtle chalkiness of the cinnamon.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the way I kind of talk about it is instead of what you would get like out of a cinnamon candy, it's almost like if you grabbed a cinnamon stick and just kind of licked it, and like it's that level of where you get the flavor,
and but
it's not like trying to punch you in the head or anything.
And that's the vintage. 2017 was a wonderful vintage in Texas. We actually probably would have pushed these grapes longer if the phenolics weren't to where they were. We wanted to preserve the acidity as much as possible, so we picked these grapes at about 21, 22 Brix-ish. and just did a very low intervention fermentation. And when I say low intervention, minimal SO2. We inoculated with the yeast and used some nutrients. Other than that, there's no tannin additions, there's no bentonite, there is no anything else really put into this wine. So I think the vintage obviously is the number one factor to this wine. Let's all pray that every year could be like 2017 and not be like 2020 here in the state of Texas.
There's a lot of reasons why no one should want anything to come back from 2020.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest here.
You know, we're ready to write it off in October. But yeah, we're happy with this. And this month, since it's Texas Wine Month, we're doing a special that if you buy 2 bottles, we'll sell this to you for 50% off. And that's not a way to try to move it faster. It's just we really believe that this is a great example of
This is a good wine. I really like this.
This is one of my favorites. This is a wine that I drink with a lot of meals, and I think it deserves to have a roasted. I'll go back to it. I really like roasted chicken and roasted potatoes with a lot of our wines. It works well, and so I believe that this wine should be paired with food, and that's where it really shines.
I mean, it
shines the most.
It really,
fatty food.
It's. I mean, well, it has the acid to hold up to it. That's the thing. Is that if it didn't have that acid, then it wouldn't be able to hold up to some of that, like you said, the grilled fatty foods. But it has those flavors that allow for it to kind of play around. And very, like what you said with the rosé, it's very similar in that it's that finish, that flintiness, a little bit of smokiness is there. I would say it's actually a little bit more present in this one than it is in the rosé. But yeah, it's.
Mourvedre is often known for its gaminess or smokiness on the finish, and that's something that I would like to promote. But this vintage gave us cherry, so it's really promoting the fruit qualities in this.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm going to take one more little splash because I want to highlight one thing in this, and it's just, you don't have to close your eyes or anything, but just think about stewed tomatoes, and in a good way, not a bad way, but just think about stewed tomatoes, and then take a sip of this.
I'm from the South. Stewed tomatoes are a thing.
Stewed tomatoes are a thing. Stewed tomatoes are real, and they should be served with okra.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So just think stewed tomatoes and then take a sip. And it's like the skin of the stewed tomato, and that's what I like about that.
Yeah,
that may not be varietal specific, but I don't care. It's a beautiful thing about this wine.
Hey, I mean, well, that's the beauty. It's like whenever you're looking at, like just using Chardonnay for an example, like Chardonnay's grown all over, but it doesn't taste the same. And I mean, you can even go in the same region and go a few miles over, and it tastes totally different than that other vineyard that's a few miles the other way. So, I mean, that's the great thing about wine and winemaking and grapes is that you get to kind of play with the grape and kind of express it as it's at. And so that's one of the reasons why I tell people, like, whenever I've had so many people come up to me, specifically Chardonnay. I had so many people come up to me and tell me they hate Chardonnay.
I don't know why.
And I'm like, what have you tried? Oh, I got this one from California. Okay, try Chablis. Come back. Like try this place. Try this place.
Try the other spectrum of Chardonnay.
and then you work your way kind of back over to there, and you kind of find like, okay, this is the point in which I don't like this varietals. Whenever it kind of goes towards this quality, and so, but like, there's so many different things that you can do with the grapes that are grown everywhere. I mean, it's so much fun.
Well, that's one of the fun things about being a small production winery. So we're between 1,800 and 2,200 cases a year, and we started off at 300 cases 4 years ago, excuse me. We've built up, and we've hit this point that's 1,800 to 2,200 cases is a very manageable. You can still make a profit. You can still hire some people to help you and still be able to pay them well enough that they stick around, and still able to focus your attention on each barrel. And that's the route we want to go to, is really try to focus our attention on each barrel, manage that wine, and usher it to glass is what we need to do. And so this, like I want to say, this Mourvedre's on the lighter side, on the Pinot S side, but then we have a Mourvedre Reserve that we used a very dark brooding Tempranillo to top it, and we did a lot of stirring and cellared it for 20 months. And even though it's pretty much the same grape from the same area, it's a totally different wine. It's very tannic, very brooding, very rich in its finish, very savory when you first take a sip of it. So it has all these things going on, and it's just the difference of time in barrel, a little bit different fermentation procedure, and it just brings you just a different wine. And those are the fun things that we like about making wine now, is that we don't have to treat it all the same. We like to work with each small lot individually, and sometimes we treat 3 or 4 lots exactly the same, and they just create beautiful wines that you don't really know what you're doing as far as you don't know your exact endpoint, but you're just doing what you know is right.
Yeah.
And the fruit will lend itself to a good wine if you just kind of usher it through. So, with that being said, we've messed a bunch of barrels up. We've had to pour some stuff out, so I'll be honest on that.
You can't make a cake without breaking a few eggs.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that hurts bad to see and do. So when you have to dump it, you're just like, oh shoot.
Well, I mean, it's all part of the process.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think anybody. I mean, I've been talking to winemakers for a long time, and I don't think I've talked to anybody where they said that everything has gone perfect every time.
Yeah.
Like it's just no one's had like a clear like either harvest or production season or anything where everything just went it went according to plan. I had no problems at all. It's like if it's the equipment breaking or something going wrong with the barrel. Or,
if it went to plans, I probably would not be in this industry if everything was exactly the same. Because if everything was exactly the same, it just wouldn't be as fun as it is. And when I say that, we're ripping hairs out and calling friends and asking, our neighbors over at Purnell Cellars. I ask Joanna and David Culkin questions all the time. I ask Ron and Todd questions all the time. I try to dig up as much information, and sometimes those are questions that I'm like, I'm not necessarily asking them for their consulting, but I'm just asking them to make sure like I'm not gonna mess it up.
It's like a sanity check.
You know what I mean? Like a sanity check. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, am I sane? Is this right? And they're probably like, this dude's freaking out for nothing. But I just want to emphasize that we're small. All of our wines are try to be as variety specific as possible, but we do have blends, and all of our wines are small lot. Some follow traditional formats. Some are a little bit more experimental fermentation format or process, whichever one you want to say it. But you mess up on a small lot, it's not as big of a boo-boo as if you mess up on a big lot. So right now we're just learning our ways. We're very young in winemaking. We're very young growers, but we're trying to create something that's a little different, a little unique, and we take science into consideration, and we also take taste and all the if I'm saying this right, the olfactory senses into consideration. And I don't know, man. We just try to approach things as naturally, and we don't want to do work if we don't have to, and so we try to do as least amount of work as possible on the wine, and I think that's a way to usher in. But when I say that, I want to also say that I'm not against, and Andy isn't against, fining or filtration, but they have their uses in winemaking, and that's a tool, and you can't always be perfect, so sometimes you have to lean on something to create a product that is approachable. We're not making this wine just for our family, we're also wanting to share this with others, so there's a lot of pride and a lot of diligence that goes into our wine that I hope translates into not just the wine when you're sitting at home drinking it with dinner or watching the game drinking it, but also translates into the experience that you have here, and also translates into reflecting well on Texas agriculture, because I believe that these wines are really grown in the vineyard. You can only mess with wines so much. They have to be grown properly, they have to be grown right, and they have to have someone managing those vines to be able to give you the product of Texas has won a lot of international awards. We don't talk about it too much, not just even in our state,
Yep.
with outside of our state and in other countries that we respect as wine growing nations. So, like I said, the infancy of our Adega Vinho is sort of just trying to see how things work, and we'll be fooling around with different styles of wines and different fermentation techniques, and until we find a path that's going to focus on our estate wine to move forward. And even with that, hopefully that path is fun. And, we have sparkling wines and pet nats, and we have a lot of plans, but we'll get to those things as we progress instead of trying to just do them all at the same time. We want to know the most about the wine before we go to the next step.
Yeah.
We want to put it that way. So it's a lot of pressure on us. Now it's on camera. It's for real now.
Well, in all honesty, you're doing it to yourself. So
yeah, we're doing it to ourselves. Hey, you know what? We're all masochists, right, over here.
Hey, I mean...
we beat ourselves up for a couple gallons of wine, right?
Yeah, I was trying to remember who said it, but someone was like, the winemaker puts the masochist into maceration or something.
It's true. Very true.
And so it's like, hey, I mean...
Why would you do that to yourself? Well, hey, the restaurant that you like to eat at, that chef has probably been a world-renowned chef. He's been all over the world, has cooked for dignitaries and everything, but he still makes the best grilled cheese sandwich on the block.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, with that being said, let's move on to one more or two wines.
All right, cool. We're with wine number 4, and you said this one's kind of special.
Yeah, this is a special blend of Merlot and Touriga Nacional. And so this is our 2018 Cuvee Carmesim. Cuvee Carmesim just means blend of dark purple in the Portuguese dialect. So we'll pour this wine here. We won a gold medal at the San Francisco Chronicle wine competition this year with this wine. It was very nice for just sort of coming out the door with our wines and exposing them to the rest of the nation. So the story behind this wine is we were looking for Touriga Nacional in 2018. Did not have, well, we didn't have any growers that could contract us any grapes. So very last minute, Dan McLaughlin at Robert Clay Vineyards in Mason, Texas, which is about an hour northwest of Fredericksburg, had a little bit over a ton available. And so we picked that at a very high brix, lots of maturity in those grapes, lots of raisinine, brought them into the winery, had a very high alcohol after fermentation, a lot of just big tannins, meaty wine. It was beautiful, but it needed to be blended with something to balance it. We had a alcohol of almost 17.5% when it finished.
Natural fermentation? Not...
Then fermentation, it got hot. We had to regulate the temperature a little bit with dry ice.
How are you able to get it past like 15.5, 16%?
Use a high alcohol Zinfandel yeast.
Oh, okay.
Which was up in the 17s, but it finished about 17.2, 17.3. And so, long story short, yeah, we blended it with a 12% Merlot from the High Plains that worked out real nicely. And so it's a roughly 50-50 blend of both the Merlot and the Touriga Nacional. Merlot's from like 8-9-year-old vines. The Touriga Nacional is, I don't want to misquote him, I think he said 16-20-year-old vines. 23 maybe. They're old.
That is a very concentrated nose.
It's very concentrated.
It's very pronounced.
Fruit.
Like whenever I was swirling it down here, I was already getting stuff coming up.
It's elegant, but it still has some brooding characteristics.
So it was at 17, you said 17.5? 17, somewhere around there? And then you blended it with 12, so did it come out to about 14% ABV by the time it was done?
I think it's 14, it's like 14.2.
Okay. Because it does have a noticeable amount of alcohol in the nose.
It's very prominent.
But it's not like this stinging, burning alcohol. It's kind of, everything else is very intense with it too,
yeah.
So it all kind of comes
It balanced
it
out. We tried, I mean, I'll be honest with you, we tried 4 blends, 25%, and then the alcohol just wasn't balancing out properly. So the blend was based on the percentage alcohol, and then from there we tweaked it a little bit.
You didn't think about selling it just as 500 ml bottles and just like reduce?
I thought about it for a minute, but it would have just been so much. I use this term a lot. It's like dragon breath. It's like if once you took a sip of that Touriga on its own, a connoisseur would have loved it. You know, a Touriga connoisseur, but for most people it would have been too much alcohol and too much tannin on the finish, and I'm not even sure it would have been sellable for the most part. So it'd have been very unique.
Even with it being as concentrated as it kind of gets on the nose, the body is still not like overbearing. It's like medium body. The tannins are really nice. They're very smooth, and they're very well integrated with the body as well.
Where the Merlot was lacking in the tannin
the Touriga
area,
popped
the
in.
Touriga popped in and took care of all that. And you know, this is a very small lot too. 150 cases. No, sorry, 175 cases. I should know that.
Well, you mean like taking care of the vineyard, making all the wine, helping with the
One
bottling?
barrel off.
Right,
It's
it's like, come on,
If we could do this every year, we would. But we plan on having the Cuvee Carmesim, which is just a name that we came up with. Like I said, blend of dark purple. We want to have that on our menu and have a new cuvee for every vintage. So the 2019 cuvee is Touriga, Merlot, and a little bit of Mourvedre. The 2020 this year is 75% Touriga, 25% Merlot. So we want to stay on line with the Merlot and Touriga, but whether percentages and bringing something else
really
in.
nice. I mean,
Well,
it really does.
It's a nice balanced wine.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, by the way, the 2020 Cuvée is all Texas Hillcountry, where this is Hillcountry High Plains. So that's a little different, but it's fun. It's drinkable.
It's definitely steak wine.
Yeah, for the
It's a
wine
steak
lover,
wine.
it's a steak wine. For someone who's just getting into wine, they can drink it and they like it. So we're happy with it.
Yeah, steak, ribs, stuff like that.
You're getting me hungry.
Yeah.
Those are the things I love.
Yeah, it's no, it has a great weight to it. Like whenever you were telling me it was like 17.5%, I was like sitting here going, Touriga at that high, that could be
Pre-blending.
But yeah, but I was like still like there could be a lot of really heavy characteristics that kind of fall into place on that.
Well, the yeast that we used to ferment the Touriga had they give you a window of what where the yeast will start dying off, and the book says, or the selling point says 16% alcohol, but it finished at 17.2 ish, so 17% alcohol. So it finished dry, and we had a little residual sugar in the Merlot, and I think that's also helped with that finish on the alcohol.
I think if it had been, and I was joking about the 500 milliliter bottle.
Yeah.
But if you had just gone straight with that Touriga, I feel like the tannin, the alcohol would have made it so bitter in the finish that it wouldn't have worked out.
I don't think it. Yeah.
And this doesn't have that element. Like the finish ends in a very kind of gradual manner. It doesn't like abruptly end with sort of a bitter note.
Yeah, you don't hit a wall or you don't take it on a road trip, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It ends kind of when it
nicely.
needs to end, and it allows you to kind of move on. So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about wine that we grow and produce, and we don't want to get a big head about it, but this is a great wine, and this is, I think, one of our best from the 2018 vintage. And hopefully we can replicate it year after year with Texas Hillcountry fruit, or at least sort of steer that direction to have Touriga. We want to, some blenders for Touriga that we really enjoy with the French vinifera, or Cabernet Franc as a blender to Touriga, Merlot as a blender to Touriga. And we know these just from tasting old world wines or wines produced in Spain and Portugal, and wines produced elsewhere in the world. It's just a fun, great variety to work with. I like to think of it as cab on steroids sometimes.
Yeah.
Where you get big time fruit, big time tannin, but you still have that body, and you can get that alcohol up high. But yeah, as we move forward, hopefully the Cuvee blend for the Cuvee Carmesim is a regular on our list.
Yeah, it's surprising to me because I really did expect it to be, especially whenever I was kind of moving it around and I was already getting it from like 6 to 8 inches away in terms of the nose. I expected it to be something that was just going to be like crushingly powerful.
Yeah.
But it has that intensity, but without like feeling like you're drinking, like you have to. It's like when you're drinking a milkshake through a straw type of thing. Like you can get some wines that are really thick, and this does a really good job of maintaining that intensity and acid, but without having like a really heavy body behind it.
Well, so that's all the Merlot. So what's going to be great about the fall is that we're releasing this Merlot. We have 90 cases of the Merlot that we blended. We put it off to the side and bottled that as a 100% Texas High Plains Merlot. And when we taste it side by side, you're going to say, okay, I get it now. You can taste the Merlot by itself, and it's a very elegant Merlot. Not a lot of punchy tannins on it. And then you'll get it when they're side by side. I just don't have any Touriga. So you can't do the Touriga on the right-hand side, but it's just, it's a product of necessity rather than a goal. This wine was a product of just we had to do something with that Touriga to bring it into the glass and to be able to be consumable.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean
thank you for that.
I do enjoy it. I do enjoy it. It put
us. I ripped a lot of hair out about this Touriga, thinking about what are we going to do with this high alcohol tannic bomb. And as being a young novice producer of alcohol or wine, we need to do some trials and we need to do some experiments, and this is one that turned out well. So
you still gonna keep with the Zinfandel yeast next time, or
I use that a lot. It promotes a lot of cherry, so a lot of our wines. I won't tell you exactly which one it is, because I don't want to give away too many secrets. But I use a lot of Zinfandel yeast on our wines. But that same yeast is used throughout the old world on other varieties. Mm-hmm. But I think Zinfandel yeast and higher alcohol yeast sometimes have a role in our winemaking here.
Especially if you're going to be using it in like a blending format.
Yeah, and especially on years like this year where a lot of the 2020 wines, if they are unadulterated, are going to be higher alcohols just based on the growing year. So it's important to have that little tool behind you. Now, one thing we've done is the last 2 years I've let all of our red wine fermentations go native yeast fermentation for the first 3 to 6 bricks drop, or the sugar depletion, 3 to 6 bricks drop in sugar, which will initiate the production of different flavors and different aromatics, and will give a little bit more of a uniqueness to the red wines. So 2019 and this year I took it a little bit further, and some of our red wines went to 10 bricks drops native yeast. And so when I say that, it means that just the natural yeast started the alcoholic fermentation, and then we added whichever yeast we're going to use. We inoculated to make sure that we finish dry and we don't have any issues with that fermentation. Have a little bit more control on it.
Yeah, and but some of that allows you to also change some of the characteristic of it, right?
True.
To the way that the yeast performs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with that, there is a little bit of risk that you run with nutrients and what yeast is consuming the nutrients. So you need to really have your nose to the wine to make sure you're not stressing the yeast too much, and to really pay attention to that fermentation. But like I said, we're small enough that we can do that, and we can watch each bin and make sure that we're fermenting properly. And you always have the cell phone. When you have a problem and you can't figure it out, you can always call someone.
Yep.
So that's an important aspect of fermentation, is being present, and that's an important factor that all the wineries follow that. But it's a fun one to see it from fruit to wine. So. Anyway, we're talking a lot about ourselves here, so we should talk more about the wine. One other thing I wanted to say about this wine is that the Touriga Nacional was hand-picked, whole cluster harvest, and My wife and her parents helped harvest this Touriga Nacional. My brother, and then Kate and her boyfriend, and a few friends before we were open to the public who were living here on the property and renting. They lent a hand in this harvest, so it was sort of fun. It's a personal harvest rather than a machine went out and picked the grapes. So that's another thing that I like about this wine, is that I had friends and family help pick it.
Yeah, it's like it's friends and family grown.
Can't say it every time, but
Yeah.
this is one that you can truly say, hey man, this came straight from the family's hands, you know. So kind of a nice little end note on it. What's that hipster term? Quaffable?
Quaffable, crushable.
Crushable.
Well, it's,
Quaffable.
if you want to go like next level hipster, you go, this is some crushable juice, man.
Yeah. Crushable juice.
Oh god, I can't stand that term.
I'll only say that if I'm wearing my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt. So if I'm not wearing my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt, I'm not going to say quaffable, crushable juice.
All right, so it looks like we have one more wine.
Yeah, that's our last one here.
Yep, let's take a look at this. And you said that this is a Reserve Mourvedre.
Yes, this is a Reserve Mourvedre, so roughly 19 months in barrel when we went to bottle. This Mourvedre was grown right in the same vineyard as our 2017 Pinofleri. So that's Buena Suerte Vineyards, picked about a week later. Alcohol's 12.5%. But we cellared it, like I said, about 19 months in barrel. And so that was New French, New American Oak, and Neutral Oak. And we topped with Tempranillo. So a very small percentage of this, maybe 1-2% is Tempranillo. And that was just sort of the management process. But this gives you all the aspects of Mourvedre that we look for in a deeper, richer Mourvedre. You smell the fruit, you smell a little bit of vanilla from the New American Oak, but there's wind's blowing here, but you get a little bit of spicy character, a small amount of smokiness, and some people want to say that's Flint.
And see, this to me has a different smoky characteristic than the previous ones where I picked it up. This is almost like more like a campfire, like a charcoal type.
Yeah,
of.
like a charred barrel.
Yeah.
Well, so that's because we used, like I said, maybe 40, maybe 50% new oak on this. So a larger new oak, larger percentage of new oak, and just a lot longer in barrel.
This one has.
Yeah.
This one has a bit of a different sort of slant in terms of the way I'm perceiving the fruit from the other ones. Like this one, I'm still getting a little bit of that red fruit, but like, what's the age on this? Because it feels like it's a little bit more developed than the other ones. Like I'm almost getting.
So this is a 2017, and it's not as fresh. And like I said, we're almost 2 years in barrel, so you have to consider that double the oxidation. So oxygen ages wine. So the maturation on this wine has gone a lot further. And then also the percentage of oak is also going to maybe take away from the fruit a little bit and give you a little bit more complexity. It also has rounded out some of those tannins also to be very savory notes.
But it still has that great acid note. It's still like everything that we've been having has had a really good, like, medium plus level of acidity, regardless of what the vintage was on it.
Thank you.
But this, I mean, yeah, you're right. I am getting more of the barrel into that. I'm getting a lot more of that, like kind of like what I said, like that charcoal, that campfire.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit of the vanilla. I'm also getting a little bit of what is like an herb. I'm trying to figure out what herb it is. It's almost like a rosemary.
You know, I haven't had this wine in a few weeks, and the longer it's set and bottled, the more it screams Mourvedre. And that's a good thing. Hey, big boy. Hey, big girl. We have a giant Great Pyrenees
big
off
dog out
camera
here.
right now. So.
It's like, we put a saddle on that dog, my kids could
Yeah.
ride it. Like, that's huge.
We'll do saddle rides later on today. No, so Mourvedre, I think it's important with the Mourvedre production to highlight some of those notes of Mourvedre. And it's hard as a winemaker. I can't decide, hey, we're going to have a barnyard quality to this wine. That just happens naturally. I'm sure there's ways to push that, but thankfully 2017 vintage was just a wonderful vintage, and there's little elements of Mourvedre that are in this wine that I'm so thankful are there, and that's a bit of the barnyard, a bit of the smoky character, some of the mysterious red notes.
And this was High Plains, right?
This is High Plains fruit.
So what I tend to tell people whenever they're exploring Texas wines is that there are some vineyards in the High Plains that do a pretty good job with some of their red varietals, like especially Mourvedre and Tempranillo, where it does allow to express some more of that barnyard than maybe some other places. Especially like you're not going to get a lot of that down here in the Hill Country, like the Hill Country AVA, but the High Plains AVA, you can kind of find some places that allow for that to develop a little bit better. I tell this story a lot. We were at a winery, and my wife was with me, and it was Bending Branch, as a matter of fact. And so she tried this wine, and I was like, oh, it kind of has this like barnyard note, almost like a pasture. And she's like, oh my gosh, I never smelled that in wine before. And then like the next one, I was like, is this from the same vineyard? And they were like, oh yeah, it is, as a matter of fact. And she's like, I was like, smell it, it's that same barnyard. And it's just like you can kind of find that there are some places that, I mean, there's technically an impurity that does it too, but like I find that there are some places within like the High Plains especially that really can develop that quality very nicely within the grape.
There's a lot of avenues that the aromatics and the flavors to our wine come from. So the terroir, or where it's grown, is a major attribute. But then the winemaking technique is a major attribute. The storage vessel, whether it's a barrel or a stainless steel tank, where it's 2020, it's about to be 2021. People store wine in plastic now. I'm not going to discuss the politics of that, but you may be drinking a wine someday that has never touched oak, but yet you think that this has been in oak for many months to years.
That semi-permeable plastic that they come out with.
It can be, and then there's other techniques there's other tools that some people use and some people don't, but there's ways to micro-oxidize, and that's to speed up the aging process. And so there's a lot of ways you can take wines, and none of it is right or wrong. It's all just comes down to the winemaker and what happens naturally, or whichever way the winemaker takes it. But as we discuss wine in Texas and being a new wine growing region, I do like to say, and this is not saying that all of our single varieties are 100% on the mark at where they should be, but I think there's an importance on, if you're going to display a wine, that it has characteristics historically of how that wine should be. So when we talk about Mourvedre, there's a lot of different ways you can take Mourvedre. You could take it into the elegant way, or you can take it into this ultra age brooding Spanish style high tannin Mourvedre from France. Can be shocking to some people because it may not be fruit forward at all, and it may be very rough and gritty in the mouth, or maybe just a delicate and very elegant, and that's the vintage and the winemaker. So I think it's important, just to be able to enjoy the wine and be able to put it into words and just to discuss, what you're tasting. Or, shoot, man, pour it in a glass and hit the pool or the river. It doesn't matter. But
and I think for a really long time in Texas, I think there are a lot of folks who are really worried about competing with California compared to making Texas wine. And there was this really big, like for a long time, it was like Texas Cab, Texas Temp, Texas it.
They had to compete.
There's so many people now who are kind of making blends. And that's because they're going, you know what, I like the qualities that I'm getting here, I like the qualities I'm getting here. I think it'll be better if I can kind of
And all those pioneers, thank you for developing the industry that we're in today. Because all those pioneers in the 70s, 80s, and 90s who had wineries, or even in the early 2000s, here on this road, 5 miles down the road, you can go to Coolman Cellars. You can 1 mile down the road, you can go to Pedernales Cellars, and 7 miles down the road, you can go to William Chris, and you can taste 3 family-owned wineries that are at different levels of time to work with Texas wines. Pernell Cellars of those 3 is the oldest, and they have a little bit different ways of doing things, and we kind of have to thank those guys for establishing this industry. That way we don't have to do the heavy duty work. We can a little bit lighter
you
load.
benefit off the experience.
That's true.
Yeah.
and thank you. That's a good thing that people need to. Llano, those are St. Genevieve. Well, those are massive, big producers.
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about local people here. Some other people have done it before. Either way, you're right. Back in the day, no one would have taken your wine seriously unless they had a reference point.
Yep.
And so we've created our own reference points now, and that's because of the diligence of those wineries and many others that have been around for 10, 20 years. And so these new wineries like ourselves, we have a lot of thanks to give them. But at the same time saying is that those people didn't decide how you do it. There's always going to be another way to do something. And we haven't exactly found out what grows the best, and I hate when people say that. I talk a lot about Touriga Nacional, but I also think Sangiovese grows real well based on our site. So our site here, if I had to go and replant everything, I'd probably replant it in Touriga Nacional, Sangiovese, and Tempranillo. And Tempranillo would be the most time consuming on the management side. Touriga and Sangiovese here at our site in Stonewall, Texas, they don't have as much, they have much more resistance. They don't have to be pruned later in the season as much. Their vigor slows down after veraison sets in, whereas Mourvedre just continues to grow. As we're seeing, the Orento continues to grow even through veraison. And so whether you limit your water or, you have fertile land, those are things that you find out year after year. And so I always wanted to say that there's no one way to do something, and we are not doing it the right way. You know what I mean? We're just doing what we know right now. So we're just happy to be able to work with these varieties and be able to buy barrels from the coopers who we do, who are French and American coopers, and we just are very thankful for our neighbors for setting up an industry 30 years in, even though we've been growing wine here for 110 years or 120 years, hasn't really been commercially accepted until the last, say, 25 years. And so I'm going to repeat myself again, is that this isn't a 5-year plan, this is a 20-year plan for me, but looking forward through it, we have children, and I can't steer how they're going to live their life, but if they want to take on the management of the vineyard and the winemaking roles, I'll die a happy man. You know what I mean?
I may have made a comment to my own wife saying, hey, you know what, if our daughters get into the wine industry, it'd be kind of a nice thing at some point.
But if they want to do something else, that's fine. So we want to set ourselves up for wine that is approachable and consumable. We want to be very food oriented with our wine, and we want to be very open with our wine. And I want to teach others. If someone has a question, I can't always guarantee it's the best answer, but that's a way to reveal. We joke around saying we have winemaking techniques and secrets. Well, all those secrets have been done a million times. They're in books, they're on YouTube, and the guy down the road taught me how to some of those secrets, and they're really not. They're just ways to polish your wine or ways to steer your wine. Those are important to develop a winemaking region, and so we don't have to try to develop it anymore. It's developing itself, and throughout the next few years you're going to see so much more expansion in this industry. I just hope we see more people planting vines in the hill country, and taking their vineyard seriously. And I hate the term billboard vineyard or show vineyard. I think that's an easy way to say that you're not taking care of your vines properly, because you can look at our vineyard, you can look at a number of vineyards around here where they would be considered world-renowned vineyards. Coleman Cellars does an amazing job, just two miles down the road. If you just take a look at their vines, you know that that's the real deal, and that's something that we strive for here. So we look up to a lot of our neighbors. And I think as we grow as an industry, we can usher in fresh blood, if you will, or fresh wine.
Juice.
Just fresh juice, right? To focus on the quality of the wine and its specific growing area. Because Texas is a big state. And when you say we're bringing grapes in from the high plains, you got to remember that that's 4 to 6 hours of driving with the grapes, and those are wonderful, passionate farming families who are growing these grapes, and don't want to take anything away from them, but if we could buy our grapes from across the street and maybe help in the management of those grapes, or usher in some new blood to grow grapes at their property where they have only focused on ranching, and maybe start growing grapes. That's good stuff, and that's where I want to see this industry going. And I sort of just like answer my own, create my own question, but
That's fine.
as we sit here, I realize I got the camera on. I better let people know. So.
All right, well, thank you, Michael, for giving us so much information,
Stuart.
running us through your wines. They were all very good. Like, I was
Thank you.
very impressed with the overall quality and the fact that you run everything through MLF. As a lot of my viewers know, I'm kind of a stickler when it comes to trying to get MLF brought into things like rosé and white wines, and I kind of knock people on when they don't do it, and I kind of feel like they should, but there's nothing to knock here. It was all very solid. Like, it had a very great mouthfeel.
Well, thank you.
So, but yeah, so thank you for running us through some of your wines and giving us the background on it. And if you are ever around the Texas Hillcountry, around Highway 290, make sure you drop into Stonewall. You go to Adega Vinho. It's a really great place, as you've seen, just to kind of hang out and enjoy a glass of wine, but also buy a ton of it and just take it back with you. And I know you won't object to that, but it's a very great winery, especially if you're interested in pairing your wines with food, like I often am. I really do enjoy the wine and food, but it's,
well, I want to say something here. So it's I've been slaughtering the pronunciation. I think Stuart has too, because
yeah,
we aren't from Portugal and we don't speak Portuguese, but Adega Vinho, Adega Vinho, and I apologize in advance to anyone who truly knows how to pronounce this.
that's fine.
And that's a joke. But.
If you're a regular to my channel, you know I can't speak English well, so it doesn't even matter. But yes, thank you for giving us the time today.
No problem. I enjoyed
running
it.
us through the wines, and like I said, if you're in the area, stop in. So,
share this video with all your friends.
Yes. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested in learning more about Texas wineries, or just understanding what values are out there in terms of your local supermarket. And I'll see y'all again soon with another episode from Wine on the Dime.
And this dude's passionate about his wine. Watch his videos because he's coming up with awesome ideas. Don't be boring. Watch the good stuff.
I'll leave the money on the tasting room.